Have you ever found yourself alone in the dark, wondering if the shadows on your wall are more than just shadows? What if those stories you heard as a child weren't just stories? What if they were real? Today we're diving deep into some of the creepiest, most spine-chilling stories from Reddit. These tales have haunted thousands of readers and might just keep you up at night too. From encounters with the paranormal to the inexplicable. Let's unravel these terrifying threads together. But before we get into it, ask yourself this: how much can you handle? Let's start with a story that's left readers questioning reality. Dr. Chase Lopez stood close to the shoreline, his rubber boots mere inches from where the inky water lapped like tongues at the sand. To me, it looked as if he was teasing it. The ocean reached, but never quite far enough to touch. Dr. Lopez's face was buried in his cell phone. He said, "Come look at this, Lena." I hesitated to duck under the yards of yellow caution tape suspended around the beach, preventing locals and tourists from entering these waters. The stench of it was strong enough from where I stood. Dr. Lopez must have been drowning in it. The smell made the air seem heavy, like you were breathing in something solid. It stuck on my tongue, metallic. The ocean reeked of blood. It took me time, but I forced myself to walk closer to the source. Dr. Lopez held out his phone to me, and I had to squint and cup my hands over the screen to see it in the sunlight. The chemical analysis of the water, fresh from our main lab, just came in, he said, and it's not oil. BP lives to see another day. Then what the hell is it? We don't know. Dr. Lopez tucked his phone into his pocket and looked into the ocean. Not yet. At least, I'm waiting for more to come through from Maine. That's just preliminary stuff. What does it smell like to you? It smells like blood. And it's so dark. Could be mass amounts of squid ink. However impossible that may be, chemical analysis would have clocked that. Right. Well, not much we can do but wait. The ocean that stretched out before us was black, with a telescope on the ground and a helicopter in the sky. We could see that this dark patch existed 75 or so feet out from the shore. It was big, but not exactly oil spill big. Beachgoers noticed the black tide rolling in a few days ago, and soon after, dead fish and other sea life began to wash ashore. The weird thing about the dead fish was that they didn't rot. By the time we arrived, they had been roasting on the beach for over 2 days, yet none of the expected effects of decomposition were present. They were in suspended animation, dead, but not looking like it, not even picked apart by gulls or other scavengers. The birds disappeared when the black tide rolled in. We found several species of fish native to this part of the Pacific, a few jellyfish, and one angel shark in the menagerie. They seemed so alive that, at first, we researchers tried to revive them. I put one orange fish inside a tank and was dismayed to find it floated belly up. There it stayed, never decomposing, for the remainder of our time on the island. On our second day there, Dr. Lopez told me that the lab results were inconclusive. "What the hell does that mean?" I said. "Can you at least tell me if it has sodium and chloride in it?" It was supposed to be a joke, but Dr. Lopez just shook his head at me. "No, Lena, I'm telling you they don't know. Whatever it's made of, it's not something we've ever seen before. It's not even blood." I sat her down. I'd never gotten such devastating or exciting news. Something new, something we could put our names on. But where to begin? How could we possibly know its dangers if we couldn't even tell what it was made of? I didn't know what reaction was appropriate to have. It has to be something. Chase, it came from Earth, didn't it? Maybe it's a chemical runoff that some goddamn plastic company shit out into the ocean. An experimental sort of thing. They didn't detect any polymers. He went on. Not a bad guess. Though, what do we do now? Are they running more tests? Doctor. Lopez looked around the tiny space. We occupied a local resort room, which was converted to suit our needs as we did our research. The resort's residents were forced to evacuate when the black tide arrived. There were bunk beds that Dr. Lopez and I shared with two others, another marine biologist named Carmen and an environmental engineer named Gabriel. There were local military guys around, too, but only to keep the tourists at bay. Excitement about the mysterious black ocean was palpable. Maybe we dive, Dr. Lopez suggested. I blanched. Chase, that substance killed those fish, whatever it is. It's toxic. We've got diving suits. It's the 21st century. It won't touch our skin. So we got ready to dive. It wasn't my place to refuse an order from my superior, and I knew that being scared was no viable excuse. Carmen agreed to dive with us, but Gabriel would go no further than the shore. He tagged along to watch from a safe distance. We slipped into diving gear and stood at the edge, just an inch from where the black tide sucked in and out. Carmen shrugged her shoulders at it. Well, I guess I'll go first if everyone is going to be a pussy about it. She walked out into the ocean. I watched her while holding my breath. I expected her to zip beneath the obsidian surface, pulled to her death by some terrible monster. I expected her to scream as the substance ate through her suit, and ultimately, her skin. I expected her to collapse and die like the fish did, silently poisoned. None of this happened. Carmen waded out several yards until she could swim, then dived beneath the water. From the radio, she said, "Come on in, folks, the water's warm." Dr. Lopez and I followed her. The water was warm. As we sank beneath it, we noticed a peculiar phenomenon, the black tide Saturday on top of the water, never mixing. It was about 20 inches thick. The temperature difference was notable. The water below the blackness was freezing, almost as if it had been siphoned of its heat. I reached my hand into it, and it was a jarring sensation to feel such warmth while the rest of me shivered. A strange sight indeed, Dr. Lopez muttered. We were staring upward into space. That's what it looked like to me. If I close my eyes, I can go back to that moment. I'm suspended in the cold ocean, staring up at an inky night sky that blocks out the light of the sun. If I stare long enough, I see little pinpricks of starlight glitter throughout it. It's almost beautiful. It is beautiful. I feel compelled to go into it and remain there in its warm embrace, floating in the atmosphere, stars rippling around me. I started to swim upward, then a voice. "Get out of the water," Gabriel commanded. Dr. Lopez caught my arm, and I came to my senses. "What's up, Gabe?" he asked. "Get out, now." We turned and swam toward the shore. The feeling of coming up through the black tide was indescribable, warm and wonderful. My skin exploded into goosebumps as I emerged from it. I wanted to go back. I was tired. I could sleep in that water. Carmen was the last one to emerge, and she walked backward. She knocked into Dr. Lopez and didn't seem to notice. "Jesus H. Christ," she said. "What the hell?" I saw it. Saw them. A dozen shark fins slowly moving through the black water toward the shoreline. Each shark's fin was different. The tide gently pushed them ashore in a neat little row, heads facing us and tails toward the sea. There were 12 different species of shark, all of them dead. "Fuck," Dr. Lopez said. "What are the odds?" The sight struck me numb. This felt purposeful, an arrangement made to be seen, a presentation. I couldn't get any closer. The water didn't feel inviting anymore. It felt hostile. Suddenly I had the urge to look away from it, as if I had met a stranger's eye for too long. "That's an Atlantic sharpnose." Carmen pointed at one of them. "How the hell is it here, in the Pacific?" "What is that one?" Gabriel asked, pointing at another. This shark was not something I'd ever seen before. It was dark pink, almost red. Adorning its head were small horns arranged like a crown. "It can't be," Dr. Lopez said. "Can't be what?" He walked to it and crouched down. Despite our protests, he grabbed the dead shark and inspected its head and the inside of its mouth. His fingers tapped along its teeth like he was a dentist, counting each one aloud. Sliding his hand along the gills and peering into its eye, he finally stood, and I saw him trembling as he turned to us. I could be wrong, but this looks like a hibiscus. "A what?" I asked. Opportunistic bugger, he went on, really fast. Lived about 100 million years ago, if I remember correctly. It's been extinct since the late Cretaceous period. None of us believed him. Carmen was the first to call him crazy. I didn't know much about extinct marine life, but I knew this wasn't possible. It must just look like a hybridus, perhaps a mutated something else. We called for help and lugged the sharp nose and the maybe hybridus back to our makeshift lab. Dr. Lopez called a marine archaeologist and a paleontologist. I went to the bathroom and inspected every inch of my skin. That intoxicating warmth was long forgotten. I was utterly disgusted at the thought of having been in that black water. I expected a red rash, weeping abrasions, and infection, but I saw nothing out of the ordinary, just my skin. Something strange happened the next day. Gabriel began talking about the black tide like it was a person. She did that on purpose, he said at breakfast. She wanted us to see those sharks. Who's she? Carmen asked. She was busy buttering a slice of bread. I watched her do it and noticed there was a minor cut on her pointer finger. Gabriel seemed irritated. The black water, that was a message to us. What kind of message? Gabe, Carmen taunted. That it can resurrect sharks from a gazillion years ago. Give me a fucking break. She's older than us. Smarter, maybe. They argued, and I left. Dr. Lopez's people came later that afternoon with more equipment and knowledge. They fawned over the shark, spent hours alone in a refrigerated room with it, came out and swore to us it's an extinct species. They began calling more people, bigwigs from huge universities. This tide didn't seem like it was ours anymore. I woke up in the middle of the night to find that Gabriel was missing from his bunk. I couldn't go back to sleep. With rising concern, I surmised he may just be using the bathroom, taking a walk, talking to a loved one in a different time zone. But I knew that wasn't the case. So I rose from bed and went to the window. I saw Gabriel on the shore. He was walking toward the tide. Fear gripped me. It was like watching someone standing atop a skyscraper about to jump. Helpless panic. Impending doom. Chase. Carmen. Wake up, I shouted. Gabriel's walking toward the fucking water. What? Carmen groaned. Doctor. Lopez rolled over to face the wall. I shook him harder, and he finally sat up. Lena, seriously. Can we please go check on him? I'm worried. I mean, why is he out there at this hour? Doctor. Lopez had been my supervisor for 3 years. Before that, he was my professor and personal advisor. He rarely said no to me. He got out of bed and followed me out of the resort and toward the black tide. The moon was full, and the beach was illuminated in pale blue. As we approached, I noticed that the light didn't reflect off the surface of the black water. It was consumed by it, like a void. It had been different in the sun. The rays reflect back at you, almost blinding. Why should the moonlight be different? Gabriel was nowhere to be seen. Doctor! Lopez and I ducked beneath the caution tape and walked as far as we were willing to. The black tide was still. If I didn't know better, I'd have said it was a solid sheet of blackness lying on top of the ocean. Vantablack. Blacker than black. Black hole. I wanted to touch it, to see if it was the same thing we encountered in the daylight, or if something else had replaced it. Then Gabriel appeared. He was floating face down in the void, several yards from the shore. Slowly, his body began to move toward us. He looked like he was in space, a place where there are millions of light years between stars and planets, and there's absolutely no light, just his partially submerged body, suspended in eternity, moving forward with such ease and purpose that there could have been a conveyor belt beneath him. My body felt drained of its blood. I was cold with fright. When I moved toward the water, Dr. Lopez grabbed me. Don't, he whispered. Don't go in there. Gabriel's body stopped floating toward us. It was frozen in the blackness, like a movie on pause. We stayed where we were, and I felt sick enough to puke. We can't leave him there. I think, Dr. Lopez started, then paused. I could hear him swallow. I think it wants us to go in. Gabriel's body reanimated and floated backward, away from the shore. I was disgusted with myself for not going after him. What if he's still alive? Not yet drowned. He floated back several more feet, stopped, and then started toward us again. I knew what Dr. Lopez meant now. These aren't the movements of the natural current. These movements are deliberate, teasing, controlled. Gabriel got close enough to the shore that we could touch him. With hubris, I crouched down and reached for his arm. "Doctor!" Lopez jerked me away, just as Gabriel zipped backward and slipped beneath the surface, blinked out of existence. TV turned off. We fell into the sand and scrambled away from the water's edge. Hot tears filled my eyes. Dr. Lopez was silent. We waited, unable to move. A few yards out, Gabriel's body appeared again, static in the void. In the daylight, we pulled Gabriel out using lifeguard equipment. He was dead, but he looked alive, asleep. When the paramedics put him on a stretcher, inky liquid spilled from his lips. We all jumped away from it. One paramedic cursed as they started to take him toward the ambulance, where a medical doctor would pronounce him dead at a hospital. "We can't allow this, Doctor," Lopez hissed. He ran after them. "Wait, we must keep the body here. The water may be infected, and it wouldn't be safe to take him to a hospital full of compromised people." I knew what he was doing because I thought the same thing. I wanted to see if Gabriel's body was going to decompose. Carmen was oddly stoic when I gave her the news about Gabriel. She said something strange that made me uneasy. He answered her call. Perhaps she was making fun of him for the previous day's conversation, which seemed cruel even for gruff Carmen. As I sat with her, I noticed the cut on her finger was redder, inflamed. "What's up with your hand?" I asked. She hid it between her thighs. "Paper cut. It's been itchy, so I made it worse." I wondered if she had that cut when we went diving. Somehow, Dr. Lopez convinced the paramedics to leave Gabriel's body with us. We took him wrapped in a body bag to the refrigerated room where we laid out some sharks and other dead things. He mentioned something about his pockets being lighter now, and I understood. Bribing a paramedic to leave our dead colleague's body here for us to study. Is this what we had come to? It was insanity. A tech from the main lab called us not long after we stored Gabriel in the room. "Have you noticed the phenomenon evaporating or dissipating at all?" "No," I said. "It's still there. Nothing has changed as far as we can see." "Weird," he said. "All the samples you sent us are gone." "What do you mean, gone?" "Well, it's gone. Completely vanished overnight. Now all we have are tubes of plain old Pacific Ocean water. We can't find a trace of the stuff anywhere." I didn't know what to make of it. Neither did they. Neither did Carmen or Dr. Lopez. For the first time in my career, I felt stupid. More than that, I felt gullible, like I'd been tricked here on a wild goose chase. Paranoia compelled me to go back to the shore and see if the substance was still there. It was. A day later, word got out about the extinct shark, and reporters started to show up. The local government had kept our secret well, but someone was loose-lipped. I suspected it was one of the two that Dr. Lopez called in. Journalists lined the perimeter of the shore and reached over guards to snap photos. Soon, it would be all over the news. Some guards grabbed cameras and smashed them into the sand, but not everyone could be caught. We were stuck, unable to categorize the black tide, unable to make sense of the dead but not decomposing corpses, and unable to find answers. Now that the press flocked, we were too uncomfortable to do our research under their curious eyes. After the accident, it felt wrong to get close to it anyhow. Dr. Lopez didn't want to discuss with me the events of Gabriel's death, yet he had been the one to ascribe malicious intention to the water that night, told me that it wants us to go in, and I believed him, still do. Sometime later, Carmen amputated her hand. I found her on the floor in the bathroom, curled into a ball, soaked in blood. So much blood I thought she couldn't possibly have any left in her body. Somewhere in the mess was a hammer she'd used to break her wrist and the saw that had done most of the deed. However, Carmen underestimated how difficult it would be to amputate a limb by yourself. As I pried her arms apart, I saw her hand was still attached to her arm, if only by scraps of flesh and frayed tendons. It got inside me. She wept. I had to get it out. Doctor! Lopez wouldn't allow me to call the paramedics again. He put the little resort into lockdown. The archaeologist and paleontologist left despite his warnings, no doubt shaken by the recent death and mutilation. They would come back for the shark when the others arrived. I secured a tourniquet on Carmen's arm while Dr. Lopez removed the rest of her hand. We bandaged her, but she was catatonic. Chase, we have to get her to a fucking hospital. I begged. She needs a transfusion. She'll die. We can't risk it, he said. Doctor, Lopez dropped the severed hand into a Tupperware container. We don't know what the tide could do if it got out. Got out? It's not some contagious disease. We don't know what it is. Lena. Carmen never fully regained consciousness. Doctor, Lopez took my phone when I was tending to her, leaving me unable to call for help even if I wanted to. I was terrified now, not just of the black tide, but of my supervisor. He was changing. Paranoid. Shifty. He spent nearly all day inside the fridge with the specimens. That night, I went out alone to the shore. I sat on the sand and watched the black tide sit motionless on the water, absorbing light. So dark it seemed biblical. I stared into the abyss for an eternity, waiting for something to be revealed to me, some divine vision, pinpricks of light, just like the ones I had seen several days ago when we took our first dive. They came into view slowly, blanketing the tide with the night sky once more. Each one's luminosity ebbed and flowed like heartbeats. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I was sitting on the edge of a planet, gazing out into infinite space. Lena. Doctor! Lopez had come after me. I think it was to prevent me from escaping to call for help, but he unknowingly saved my life instead. I snapped out of my dreadful trance and got to my feet. The stars were gone, and it remained as I'd seen it before. No longer beautiful, but repulsive in its vastness. Those stars must have been what Gabriel saw before he walked into the void. We went back inside, and he admonished me. Think of what happened to Gabriel. He said, do you want that to be you? There's something wrong with it. I know there is. Then we heard it. Thumping. Rhythmic. Like a heartbeat, coming from the fridge. Doctor, Lopez and I approached it cautiously. Standing in front of the door, I realized that the thumping was coming from lower down on the thick door, perhaps just a foot or so off the ground. What is that? I asked. He paled. I don't know. Too terrified to open the door, we retreated to our beds. But the thumping continued throughout the night. Hours and hours I couldn't sleep, waiting for the sun to rise and make everything seem less frightening. It was nearly 5 in the morning when Dr. Lopez rose and declared enough was enough. We're scholars. God damn it. And we're acting like children. Chase. Wait, I pleaded. He was right. We were like 2 kids afraid of the closet. We were scientists, doctors. The black tide didn't have thoughts or feelings. Gabriel drowned, and Carmen was mentally ill. There was an explanation for everything if you looked hard enough. We stood outside the fridge's door again, listening to the thump, thump, thump. I stood behind Dr. Lopez as he reached for the handle and opened the door. Gabriel, naked on his hands and knees, continued to thrust his head into the space where the door had been. The top of his skull was bloody from hours of impact. The realization hit me like a brick to the face. He's alive. Doctor! Lopez didn't move. He can't be. Then plop. One shark fell from a shelf and flopped helplessly on the floor. Another followed. Then all the fish began to move. The room full of dead things animated, and they were all alive once more despite being out of water for several days. Wet slapping filled the air. Even the hibiscus was alive, wriggling its way toward the open door. Gabriel remained on his hands and knees, but dragged himself forward, head hanging limp between his shoulders as if it were too heavy to lift. A trail of black water dripped from his slack jaw. Doctor! Lopez slammed the door on him. Chase, I cried. I wept freely now, unable to cope with the sight of the alive dead. We have to help him. Open the fucking door! He isn't alive. None of those things are alive. It's impossible. I reached for the handle, but Dr. Lopez shoved me away. I stumbled backward and lost my balance. landing hard on the floor. He loomed over me. "Don't you dare! How can you just leave him in there?" "We're going to call the main lab," he replied. "Doctor." Lopez pulled his cell phone out and rang the number right there. Standing with his back to the fridge, it rang and rang and rang, then no one answered. He cursed. "What the hell? They're a 24-hour lab. Damn it." He tried again. 3 more times. 2 more. He gave me my cell phone, and I tried them too. The lab didn't answer. Suddenly, I felt the weight of our isolation. Gabriel's thumping resumed inside the fridge. The black tide was retreating. "Doctor!" Lopez and I stood alone on the shore, unburdened by the click-click-click of photographers, watching the darkness shrink away from us. It was moving, all of it, floating slowly out into the open ocean as one great mass. The smell of blood dissipated as it got further away from the beach. "Where is it going?" I asked. "Doctor!" Lopez shook his head. "I don't know." We could hear Gabriel and the fish slamming around inside the resort from where we stood. They were louder, more frantic. Gabriel even began to scream, a long, hoarse wailing that filled me with a sense of dread and nausea. It was a mournful cry, something you might hear at a funeral as the casket is lowered into the earth. "I think, Doctor," Lopez finally said, "that they want to go with it." As the black tide melted into the horizon, I saw the stars glimmer across it once more. But it doesn't stop there. The next story digs into something even darker. I call him David. He has been watching me. In the last month or so, I have seen horrors beyond my own understanding. Growing up, I have been a massive fan of the horror genre. When I was young, before I could remember everything clearly, my mother would take me and my older sibling to the library to get Goosebumps CDs. I must have been no younger than 3, maybe 4. This is what my mother told me anyways. But that is neither here nor there. This is just to say I was not easy to scare growing up. I still am not easy to scare. I was born in Montana on the 3rd of March 2003, and after I turned 4 or 5, my dad had to get a different job as the housing crisis had begun. He had no college degree or any experience that would be considered worthwhile, so he would take what he could get. That would lead us to move down into Sheridan, Wyoming. Sheridan is just under the Montana border with a couple thousand people living there. We moved here because of the grandparents on my mom's side. They moved here way back, raising both my mom and uncle in this small town. With the help of that family, my dad got a job working as a teller for a bank. Not the most lucrative way of making money, but a way to make money nonetheless. And while this move to bumfuck nowhere did not affect me, my older sister was devastated. I had no school friends. I was just in preschool. My older sister, on the other hand, who had been in elementary school for some time, cried the whole car ride. My younger sister, born 3 years after me, did not even know what was going on. For me, everything was fine for years despite my family having no money. I had the whole school experience with things such as puppy love, after-school activities, and spending time with friends on my birthdays or Christmas. After I started to understand the financial situation my parents were in, I tried not asking for expensive toys or gadgets in an attempt to make life easier for my parents and for me to be less disappointed. The 5 of us were happy. Of course, all the other kids my age thought I was crazy. I didn't have a phone. The only console I had was a Wii, the Wii had came out, and all the food we ate was great value or something similar to Walmart brand food. I was not popular, but overall I was well liked, and I would continue to embrace this life I built until middle school, 6th to 8th grade in Sheridan. When my first encounter happened, I remember it being winter as snow was everywhere. The house we had in Sheridan was walking distance from the middle school. Back in those days, the neighbor kids, my older sister, and I would walk to and from school every day. It wasn't rare for one of us to stay a little longer to talk to a teacher or go do something else completely. We were all independent individuals. Hell, one of the neighbor kids only walked to school with us and not once walked back with us. During the winter, The group largely resembled that of the kids from A Christmas Story. During the colder months, minus being chased. One day, I would stay at school a little later than usual, and I had told that group to leave me behind. My English teacher wanted me to finish a project I had. She was worried as I was terrible with doing homework. I don't exactly remember if I finished or not. Probably not. I was a bit airheaded and typically forgot what all happened at school by the time I walked home. By the time I was outside walking home, the sun had begun to set. Not too unusual, as it gets dark around 5 during the winter months. This meant if you had extracurriculars in this time, you almost always went home as the sun was setting, something I didn't do often at the time, meaning this was a first to me. It wasn't eerie or anything, just a different time in the same place. The night sky was clear, but the air was freezing. My glasses would fog up as I breathed, trying to contain the heat leaving my mouth by having my coat cover the lower half of my face. The route I took home brought me through Kendrick Park, a lovely place in the spring, summer, and fall, but dull and lifeless in the winter. There is this path that goes up this hill that splits a miniature forest in half. This was before they built an improved path below the parking lot of the school to keep the hill in place. That wooded area always seemed much more vast and full as a kid than they actually were. We'd play in them often, tag and such, for hours, never seeming to reach any ends. Anyways, I was marching down this path, careful not to slip on the ice. There were aura lights that lined the path, illuminating the snow ahead of me. And, of course, like your typical horror movie, there was a shuffling in the trees. That night was the first night I saw David. That is what I called him. That is what I still call him. David was a tall, nude man that terrified me. I'm not sure of his motives, but I'd say he was hunting me at times. It wasn't until I reached the bottom of the hill did I turn around to see him. He had no genitals, thank fuck. But he was just standing there in this cold fucking weather. No clothing, no fur. Just the mist being expelled through his mouth. I could only stare into his dark eyes, the pupils seeming never-ending. It felt like an eternity, but it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes before I started to run. I ran. I began to sob, afraid to turn around, stumbling every so often as the weight of my backpack made it difficult to keep my balance. I'd make it home that night. I am not sure if David even chased me. Crashing through the front door, my mom came to comfort me quick after hearing me cry. I don't remember much after that. According to my older sister, I blurted out something about a naked tall man, whose eyes were not his own. Mom, practically shitting herself, my sister's words, called the cops, but they did not find anyone, or they couldn't find anyone. My mom was afraid, mad, confused. She would tell Dad what I said once he got home, and eventually, even my grandfather caught wind of what happened. The two of them would go out and search with the cops without much success. The man was gone. I would later tell my sister about David. She had the idea of giving him his name to make it easier for me to tell her. I don't know if she believed me at the time. She was born a skeptic like everyone in my family. Her reaction was one of confusion, but after that night, she would always walk closer to me when she could. She probably thought I just saw a man, just like my parents and police. The neighbor kids had took note of the police from the previous night. They would ask my sister and I, neither of us knowing what to say. I wouldn't say anything. My sister would speak for me, lying, saying that I found a lost dog or something, and the police were just picking it up as it ran out the front door. Something like that. They didn't push for more details. I wouldn't see David again for months, maybe over a year. I can't remember. Those details seemed to be faded with time. I had almost completely forgotten about David, but the fear from my first experience followed me even after the memory disappeared. I still remember the heat of the day from the second encounter with David. It was summer. I couldn't tell you the day or the exact time of when I saw him. As when you're a kid without ambition, summer passes you by so quick you lose track of time. I had a friend with me this next time, Justin. He was just like me, a kid with no ambition, little money, and doing whatever he can to entertain himself. The two of us would go around on our cheap bikes, buying snacks which Change found in couches, watching TV, playing video games, swimming, and so on, and so on. On this day, we threw ice cream in a blender and made milkshakes with Great Value ice cream. It was a typical summer day for us, until Justin got bored of the YouTube video that had auto-played. Justin would look at me and ask, "Did you know we have a basement?" I didn't, and I was intrigued. Justin lived in a house with a family above his home. I just assumed that there might have been a family below us if there was a basement. Justin would then ask, "Do you want to go down there and explore?" Of course. I say of course. We had to go out the back door. The heat was beating down on the two of us. The basement hatch was just to the left of the back door. Justin opened it up, and we both went down, Justin leading me. There was no lights. I suppose the light bulbs that were down here had burnt out years ago. Someone leaving them on and never coming back down. It was clear that nobody had been down here in a while. Thankfully, Justin had brought her flashlights with him. There were no doors, only concrete imitating doorways. The cold layout of the basement resembled the home that lay above it, with walls and corners. Other than the rats and loan boxes, the basement was empty. The two of us would scrounge around the loose boxes, careful not to disturb any rats. They were largely filled with garbage. Many, if the boxes were filled with old clothes, creepy dolls, and even some jewelry that looked expensive. When we came across anything that looked like treasure, one of us would cram the thing into one of our pockets. Justin found a ball, and we passed it to each other in the dark for a minute before resuming our search. Lots of boring things, old papers we did not want to read, and dusty books were quickly unpacked. The basement now looked like it was robbed. I mean, depending on how you look at it, we did rob it. What the fuck? Justin would scream. I would turn around, going to see what Justin was swearing over. David. He was blocking the way out. My blood ran cold. That winter, from several months before, suddenly flooded my thoughts, the cold feeling from that night returning to my face. I now have a better look at this thing. Using the false doorways as a reference, this thing was taller than the typical doors in a house. Having to slouch to fit in the damn basement, it had thin hair that was illuminated by the sunlight coming from the only exit. A light that I now so desperately wanted to feel. And its eyes, its fucking eyes. The pupils filled the entire eye, making them pitch black. Neither me nor Justin could be brought to move. A minute or two goes by of silence. Justin would make a slow inhale. "Who the fuck are you? What do you want?" Justin would scream, breaking the silence. The thing fucking smiled, slowly but noticeably. Shit, 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 shit. Without taking my eyes off of the thing, I reach for something. Anything within a box near me. I grab an old picture frame and stand up once again. I was ready to throw whatever I grabbed at David. Justin began to breathe faster, beginning to panic. "Leave us alone! Fuck off, you freak!" Justin tossed an entire box. This one filled with the old clothing we did not want. The box would fall short. Coming to the thing's feet, David looked at it. Every move David made was slow. Painfully slow. David picked up something from the pile that spilled out of the box. The two of us stopped breathing, waiting for him to attack or defend something. But the thing, David, left, slowly, without warning, without noise. The two of us just stood there, unable to move in fear that he was waiting for us. I broke my focus to look at Justin. He looked back. "Hey," I broke the silence, hoping and praying that I didn't just call the creature back to us. "Yeah," Justin responded, voice shaking. "Let's go to my house." The two of us ran up the stairs, slam into the back door, grabbing whatever. We got on our bikes and left. We did not speak. Not until we were at my home. We acted as if nothing had happened. Justin would spend the night, and the two of us stayed up late into the next morning. Justin would move to his grandfather's a day later, a nice place just out of town. I'd ask about this later in life. Apparently something happened to the family above him overnight. His mom was the one who sent him to his grandpa, and she did not tell him why until he was an adult. Justin and I would still hang out. We arguably hung out more now. I'd practically spend the entire weekend over at Justin's grandfather's with Justin. Being close enough to town as it isn't a whole ordeal to get a ride, but just far enough out that we could do even more things. All those homes all have large backyards, large enough to do miniature camping trips. Being outside of town meant we could have large fires, fireworks, and so on. Justin would end up getting a BB gun. While we never shot at any animals, we would practice our aim shooting these makeshift targets. The targets we set up were on this dingy shed. We would talk about the basement one day, the weekend before school started. Do you know what it was? The question came from Justin. I wanted to play dumb, but immediately knew what he was talking about. What? The thing that trapped us in the basement. Justin paused. You did not scream. Did you, I don't know, see him before? Once. Did he follow you to my house? I'm not sure. I shot Justin's BB gun, missing the target entirely. I handed Justin his gun for his turn. Have you seen him since then? I asked. Maybe. It's like I'd see him standing in the corner of the room, but it is just a shirt hanging up. Justin shivered, recalling this memory. Let's forget about him. David, I tell Justin. That's what I call him. Why David? Why did your mom call you Justin? Justin fired his shot. One ring off from a bullseye. Dunno. I call him David for the same reason your mom calls you Justin. Because, well, that is just how things go. I pause again, lining up my shot. I don't know. I'm just a kid. I shot a bullseye. Not long after this conversation, David would come to see me. Justin was in Minnesota with his grandfather, going on a trip to visit family. It was the first weekend since school started. I wasn't used to the school schedule yet, so I was staying up late watching Adult Swim or whatever was on that late. I ended up falling asleep in my living room. Tap, tap, tap. The couch I was sleeping on was under the window that was facing towards the street. The window has curtains, but I left the curtains up after closing the window. I wasn't thinking. The TV was on the other side of the room. If someone wanted, they could watch whatever Adult Swim show was on along with me. But, alas, our TV had this automatic turn-off system so that after an hour or so it would turn off. It means the poor street folk couldn't watch our TV without me. I was dreaming. I forget about what. It doesn't matter. But there is this tapping I hear in my dream. Well, I know now that the tapping wasn't in a dream. The room was almost silent. Darkness was overwhelming. My eyes were adjusted to the dim-lit room, the only light being from the moon. I didn't move my body. I was tired. I had my eyes half open and taking in the room around me, about to close them when tap, tap, tap. I fully opened my eyes. I hadn't gotten up yet. I shuffled to get up, but that is when I saw David, his reflection in the black screen TV. I frowncy. My gaze was locked onto David's reflection. He was grinning. His smile was unnaturally large tonight. His eyes were fixated on me, looking down on me. I was defenseless, afraid, and unable to move. I watched this reflection for hours, literal hours this time, every 10 or so minutes, counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, starting back at 1 again every time he tapped on the glass. About the second hour in, I had to pee. I ended up pissing my pants. The wet stain in my pants was uncomfortable and it stunk. I know Mom and Dad would be pissed about me pissing on the couch, but I couldn't be bothered with that seemingly pointless thought right now. Right now, I needed to not move. Another hour would go by. 18 window taps an hour, I assumed. 3,600 seconds. The dread I felt was stronger than the need to sleep. Another hour would go by. Then another hour of this painful counting, of this tapping routine. And after another 30 minutes, about 6:30, the man frowns. His expression was angry. The anxiety I felt while watching him leave was immeasurable. Once I was confident he was gone, about 5 minutes after he faded from the TV, I ran into my bedroom. I'd throw off my pajamas and underwear, walk into my room and pass out into my bed. My dad was furious about the piss. It was about 2 p.m. when I woke up. I would exit my room with a dirty towel around my waist, and while heading towards the shower, my dad would stop me. "Why does my couch smell like pee?" I was ready to tell him, but only after I showered. "Can I please go shower first? I can explain it when I am clean." "Are you hungover? Are you doing drugs? What drugs are you doing?" My dad had a mix of fury and concern. I ignored his questions for now. He allowed me to head into the bathroom, seeing how little I was dressed. I would have to explain it. He wouldn't let go of this if I didn't. The water from the shower head felt amazing. I washed away all the sweat and piss sticking to me. To be in a room with no windows for David to peek into gave me relief. I'd wash everything that day, hair to toes. The water helped wake me up, bringing me out of the drowsy state I was in. I would finish my shower, put clean clothes on, and meet my dad right as I exit the bathroom. I did not know what to tell him. I know I didn't do drugs that day, but what part of the night was believable? An impossibly tall man who had black eyes watched me sleep. I tried to explain what I saw. Thankfully, he half believed me. He believed that there could have been a man at the window last night, but he also had me drug tested. The results came back negative for all drugs they tested for. My parents officially were concerned now. This is the second time, to their knowledge, as I had yet to bring up the basement incident, that I brought up David. This creepy nudist who had a thing for their son. We had no security at the time. Nothing to prevent a break-in or any sort of crime from happening. That is when they decided to start taking their jobs more seriously. My mom was hired to be a substitute teacher. It helps pay for small luxury things like on-brand food. My dad eventually got promoted. A lot, even though he did not have a collage degree. He took personal time to study how banking and loans work. This study eventually got him a job giving loans to people who want to buy houses and cars and such. It was after one of his many promotions Dad went to buy security cameras. That would be the last I saw of David in my teenage years. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe David has an understanding of modern technology. Maybe he got bored of me. But just because I didn't see him doesn't mean he had stopped visiting me. However, it was January, earlier this year. I'd been looking through old photos. I hadn't thought of David since I was 13 all those years ago. I am of legal drinking age now, 10 whole years. As of now, me and my girlfriend were planning on moving in together. I was getting boxes filled with stuff I thought I needed. Looking through my old stuff, I found some old photos from my teen years. Some were Polaroids. Some were printed from one of those Walmart kiosks. It was nostalgic looking at me and Justin back in those years. There was a photo of the day I first met my girlfriend, and another after I had my first drink. Then there was a photo of the mountain trip me, Justin, and some others had. It was Justin's grandpa who took us and who took the photo. We were 16 at the time. There were 2 other boys, Brandon and Sam. The photo was taken on a Polaroid, but there were 5 figures in the photo. I didn't think much of it until minutes thinking about who all was there. How the fuck did I miss this? The memories of David came back. The snow, the basement, the reflection. There was more photos. Some where David was right fucking next to me. The bastard never left me alone. The photos I had went up until my 21st birthday, and checking my phone, I had some photos with him just last Christmas. The Christmas was just last month. My girlfriend came into my room, concerned. "What's wrong, baby?" "Look at this photo." It was the photo from the mountain trip. "What's up with it?" If Doug, Justin's grandpa, took the photo, and Justin, Sam, and Brandon are in the photo with me, who is that? I point to the figure. She was worried. It was written on her face, but she did not say anything before I started showing her all the other photos. One from my birthday, our anniversary, and even one from my grandpa's funeral, Dad's side. "I don't know." Her voice was faint compared to her normal volume. What was she supposed to know? Her boyfriend had gone crazy. I look around my room, pushing things around. I break some things as I opening the curtains in my room and looking out the window. He was there. His face was almost pressed up to the window, just like last time. I didn't know what to do. My girlfriend shrieked seeing the man there. quickly scurrying out of the room. She called 911, explaining the situation. My mom heard from the living room and came running in. It all happened so fast. Mom pushed me to the side. Bang, 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 bang. 4 shots rang through the house. My mom had bought a pistol. After the financial situation improved, of course, but she never forgot what I said. The experiences I had at 13. She was ready for this day. David gave an animal-like screech, running away. I got up in time to see him disappear into the night. The cops would question the 3 of us, asking my mom to see the security footage. The footage was corrupted, from minutes before I opened my curtain to right after David left. I spent these last few months afraid, not sure what to do next. I would stay inside for long periods of time. I thought she would leave me. But apparently my girlfriend loves me more than I thought, helping me go through these last months. But I have been inside for too long now. I hate having to be taken care of. I need to get my life back in order. I am going to go around asking about my situation around town, bringing it up to extended family, and so on. I hope David had died to the bullets, but just in case, I'm asking if anyone has had a similar experience. Any advice or clues as to what I am dealing with is appreciated. I have an update. I'll start this post the day after I had finished posting the last one. I was full of anxiety. I'd be stepping outside for the first time in months, not knowing if David would be watching me, but I had to do this. This whole ordeal had postponed the whole moving in with Jane, my girlfriend. I'll be honest, I am surprised she put up with me for all those months. I was spending a lot of time in my room with everything closed. I only left to use the bathroom and to spend time with Jane in the living room. The first thing I did was get my hair cut. I had, or rather I went to, a stylist. Needless to say, when I suddenly emerged out of my tomb to ask for a different style, it was a welcome surprise for him. His words. I had a new style I wanted to try out. I won't get into details as I am one of those people who just think hair is hair. I paid him once he finished my hair and I was on my way. I did not ask if he had seen David. Maybe I should have. It doesn't matter now. Over these last few days, with the help of my mom, as my dad was much more busy, I would ask my family about David. Well, I wouldn't directly mention him. I'll just ask if they have seen strange people who seemed impossible, like a 7-foot man who held his body in a strange way. Nobody in my family had seemed to seen David. I was about to give up my search when my grandfather, Mom's side, would call me over to his house to have a drink. He must have caught wind of what I was going around doing. He was the grandfather who came down to look for David that winter all those years ago. He knew something. It was an unexpected conversation with my grandfather. I'm sure he noticed the stressed expression I had when I went over to his house. He is a war vet and retired some time ago. Raised both my mother and uncle here in Sheridan. These next few paragraphs are his story. I didn't take notes, but I will try to make this as accurate as possible. To cut straight to the bone, my grandpa, Ed or Eddie, had also encountered David. When I told him my name for the creature, he could not help from laughing. He and a few others called him Johnson due to his resemblance to liver-eating Johnson, a white guy who ate the livers of natives. I asked him about it and just told me to listen. Papa Ed had moved to Sheridan with Grandma sometime after the Vietnam War, almost 50-some years ago. Grandpa had no problems rejoining society with the help of Grandma. He was working for the US Postal Service before retirement, saving up for wood, nails, and any new gadgets that would help keep the house from disrepair. But that is beside the point. In his first few years back, he began making friends with many people who were moving into town looking for a small, quiet place to live, just like my grandpa. Those friends loved trying to scare him as he was just a big guy who wasn't easily scared. They would tell him about local urban legends, and Papa Ed, being the hard man he is, wasn't fazed by any of the stories. He did not believe in the paranormal. He was a God-fearing man. How were you going to make someone afraid when they don't believe a word out of your mouth? This whole game of attempting to scare Grandpa would go on for a year or so, and by then he and Grandma would have their youngest kid, my mom. They were a happy family, the picture-perfect family, the family everyone wanted for themselves. There was one night that Johnson was brought up, and this was the first time Papa Ed would hear about him. He was at a bar when the person brought it up. The man was a drunk, skipping town not long after this night. But he was once a well-respected businessman before some sort of bear attack killed his wife or son or something along those lines. Well, this drunk heard about this game that everyone played, telling the scariest stories they know, and he wanted in on the action. But unlike the many times before, where the crowd would erupt in laughter as someone told a silly story about the boogeyman, the bar would go silent. Nobody spoke a word, except of course the one man who brought him up, telling the story of Johnson, a man who took revenge on the crow for killing his wife, eating the livers of many of his victims, and striking fear in the native crow. But in this story, his death was just a cover-up for what happened. After eating the livers of many Crow Indians, he started to change. At some point, he couldn't die to age, disease, or any normal means, whether it be the fear that the Crow Nation had, or that livers did actually give supernatural powers when eaten. It turned Johnson into a creature. This creature was David to me. This creature was Johnson to the town of Sheridan. Once the man was done, nobody spoke. The pressure in the room was similar to the pressure felt when you make a terrible joke about a tragedy right after it happened. Forget he said anything. One of the men sitting next to Papa would comment. He don't know what he's talking about. For the first time, Papa was unnerved, not by the story, but by the reaction to the story. Papa Ed had heard several stories similar to this one, so why had this one moved everyone to silence? He did not believe in the Johnson whose story was told, or at least he didn't think he believed it, but for a split second he thought that maybe, just maybe, this was a real thing, where instead of some sort of unnatural creature coming out of the woods, a real man was terrorizing this town. This drunk man won the game. About time I'd get my tab and head home, but Grandpa responded. The bar didn't speak as he left. He would pay his tab, then pausing, he also paid the tab of the drunk man. He won after all, and winners deserve something. He would make it home without incident. He was greeted by Grandma, seated by the front door, waiting for his return. She already had put the kids to bed. The two of them would go to bed peacefully, exchanging small talk as they drifted off into sleep. But he woke up later in the night. The moon had lit up the outside well enough to see without straining the eyes. Grandma was asleep next to him. He admired her for a bit. She was aging, but even now he could tell that this woman would be beautiful until death came to claim her. But there was more important business, distracting him from the beauty of his wife. He needed to use the bathroom, so that is what he did. Cleaning up, he decided that he also needed a glass of water before going back to sleep. He made his way downstairs, careful not to wake any children and careful not to wake up Grandma. The faucet made minimum noise, the floor didn't creak, and the house was well kept. The water was refreshing, the night was the quietest it had been, and the sky was beautiful. There was no sound of crickets, no flies swarming any leftover food, nothing. But as he had turned to head back upstairs, he noticed something, a detail that strikes fear into everyone who experiences it. The front door was open. He rushed back upstairs to grab one of his rifles, searching the house on his way back up, double-checking every inch on his way back down, thoroughly checking the downstairs. My mom was okay, and so was my uncle. Almost everything seemed to be in place. Nothing appeared to be stolen or damaged, but there was one last thing that he needed to check. My grandfather would pause, just for a moment. He was getting emotional. Until now, I don't believe I had ever seen him get this emotional over a story. He asked if I knew about my second uncle. My blood ran cold. I didn't know I had one. You, the reader, can probably guess some of what my grandfather told me next. I knew what he was going to say. My grandfather would run into the room of that second uncle, and he was horrified. Turning on the light, he would see this thing painted red with the blood of his son, the uncle who I never had the chance of meeting, that uncle who had his life cut short, David or Johnson, whatever his name was, turned around with this impossible smile. My grandfather would raise his gun, aiming at him, a mix of rage and fear taking control of his body. He wanted to pull the trigger, to kill the damn thing. He wanted to avenge his son. He wanted so much in that exact moment. He put his finger to the trigger, but he was shaking. He couldn't see straight. David would walk right next to Ed. Slowly. Every step taken by David felt like an hour. Grandpa can now see his boy behind David, the body a bloody mangled mess. David wouldn't touch my grandfather or anyone else that night. Just his oldest boy. Grandpa failed to pull the trigger. Every step David took killed my grandfather, killing him again, and again, again, and again, and again. But Grandpa, despite how much he wished to trade places with his boy, lived. Seeing the disparity in my grandfather's face, David allegedly made a noise. There were no words to describe it, but it almost read as David laughing at my grandfather. Once David left his sight, he began to cry out uncontrollably into the night. He made so much noise that not only did Grandma come down and see the remains of her once beautiful boy, but the neighbors called 911, not knowing the horrors of what was happening next to them. Papa Ed began sobbing. I comforted him. I didn't know what to do. Why this thing had chosen to kill my uncle? Why was that thing haunting me? Why was he allowing me to live? Why? I had so many questions that I did not have answers for, and it was terrifying. I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home and cry. I wanted to crawl up in my bed and rot and die. Because what if David finally decides to kill me? What then? What would David do to me? After some time, my grandpa would calm down and resume the story. After David left, he immediately called for help, attempting to revive the son that he lost. The police would come through the still open door, answering the call from the neighbors. The officers saw the scene before them. They knew what happened. They took his statement. They already knew what happened, but couldn't do anything about David. They couldn't even find David consistently. For the report that they let out, the police labeled the incident as a bear attack. Bear attack. Now, there was a detail in my last post I omitted, as I did not think it was related to my post about David. In my last post, I mentioned that Justin had to move out to his grandfather's. I didn't think it was related to the story at the time, but now I'm not too sure. Justin's mom said it was for safety reasons, that the family upstairs got attacked by a grizzly bear. I thought it was odd. I mean, it is odd. After all, it isn't all too common for a grizzly bear to show up in the middle of town and make its way upstairs to attack a family. Was this some sort of hidden message? That whenever there is some sort of bear attack in town, that it was David? How violent is this thing? How long has he been around? How old is David? Did you tell anyone what happened that night? I asked Grandpa. I told your mom and grandmother what the police said. Your mother thinks it was just a bear. Your grandmother knows as much as the two of us. He paused for a breath. You know, your mother named you after him. Kit, I asked. Christopher. We would continue to talk about unrelated subjects, to calm each other. I felt terrible about having my grandfather relive that night. As the sun began to set, I started making my way out the door. But before I could go, my grandfather gave me a present, a wooden box. It was heavy. Inside of that box was a gun. I'm not an expert. If I were to describe it as someone who doesn't know anything, it is like one of those from an old Western movie. We exchanged glances, just in case. Thank you. Love you, Papa. This post isn't as long as my last one. I apologize for that, but I just don't know anything about this thing. As I write this down, I see David in my fucking window. I'm not sure how to tack this on, as I was pretty much done with my post until last night. I suppose I'll start right after I wrote that sentence. When I saw him in the window, my heart sank. It sank so deep into me that I could swear I felt it hit the floor. I wrote that sentence, looking down for only a moment to make sure I didn't misspell anything. But David didn't move. Not yet. There was a long silence between us, looking at him. I can tell my mom's gun did not leave any significant damage. After another eternity, I began screaming at David, asking him why he was following me, asking why he did what he did. He smiled, full of glee and what seemed to be whimsy. I backed into my desk. careful not to shove my grandpa's gift off the counter. Fumbling, I managed to get the gun out of the box. Grabbing a few bullets, I loaded the gun, careful not to release my gaze. I aimed the gun at David. He did not falter. In fact, he was bolder than ever tonight, opening the fucking window separating us, tearing through the screen, and climbing into the room with me. Slowly, he got close enough that the gun I held was right up to where his gut was. I fired one shot, and David recoiled a bit. I don't think he expected me to pull the trigger. His face was shocked, just as shocked as I was. David stumbled back, holding himself where he was shot. He did not bleed. He was mostly unharmed, a bruise forming where he had been shot. He reached down, picking the bullet up off the ground. Mom ran in, hearing the gunshot with my dad right behind her. I had never seen David move so fast. He threw one of his hands wildly, thwacking my mother and sending her into the door. He smashed the desk under the window that he came through and even broke that window's glass. I raised the gun again. I missed the second shot. David grabbed the gun and threw it. He approached me. His face began to grin again. In my last post, I started by saying I wasn't easily scared. At this moment, facing David, I can say that I have never felt this genuine fear in my life. I stared into his eyes. The pupil fully engulfed them. Now, in retrospect, I don't think they are the same eyes as those of an animal or person. They were just imitating the eyes that we have. Those fake eyes. I saw something deep inside of them. My focus broke from the eyes, only to be brought down to David's mouth. This was the first time I had seen inside of it. I don't know how to describe it accurately. The first word that comes to mind is abyss or Lovecraftian, as there was a second row of ever-changing teeth, and just a little further he was always changing, morphing. I was awestruck but horrified beyond my understanding. Staring down into David's mouth, it seemed to be impossibly larger inside than outside. It was hard to describe. A third shot rang out. My older sister was standing in the doorway with my mother's gun as our father was holding our mom. David retreated. My sister managed to shoot him in his mouth. To my surprise, he seemed to begin bleeding from his mouth. David would quickly disappear, crashing through my window to escape. I lay where I was. I did not know what to make of that encounter. Why was tonight different? Why did he attack? Why did he kill or eat my uncle? I had so many more questions and no answers to any of them. My older sister ran over to our mother, tending to her alongside our father. Right now, Mom is in the hospital. David broke several bones when he hit her, mostly those in her ribcage area. I called Grandpa. I'm staying with them tonight, probably for the next few nights as well. Grandpa is one of the only people I know who has an understanding of what I am currently going through right now. And if David is now ready to attack me, then I need someone who sees David the way I do. With my mom in the hospital, Grandpa is the only one who understands this situation. I called my girlfriend to explain the situation, and a guy answered. She's busy, little bro. Fuck me. I won't make this a personal diary, so I'll keep my thoughts short. Don't get me wrong. I don't blame her for looking for other guys to comfort her, but it still hurts. I want things to go back to the way things were before I found those stupid photos. I want my girlfriend back. I want my mom to be healthy again, and I want to completely forget about David. I was planning on calling Justin as well, but I just need to cry right now. It is the morning after I wrote all of what is above. I didn't post yet in case I saw David one more time between that last sentence and the call with Justin. On that note, I called Justin. I started the conversation by asking how he was doing, and he told me last week his grandfather passed away. While sad, Justin and Justin's mom was the only family his grandfather had, and Justin managed to get a massive inheritance because of it. That includes the house that is out of town where we shot BBs. I'll skip the pleasantries for the sake of this story. I told Justin about my attack. There was a long silence on Justin's end before he spoke again. Are you all right? It was a dumb question, but what else was he supposed to ask? Did I find out how to kill David? Did you find out who or what David was? Some other third question that I have no answer to. I only have a few theories. Justin is going to be spending the night with me and my grandfather for a while. Just in case he sees David as well. Safety in numbers. Who knows with David? David could just be like a nuke, where your numbers don't matter, as the foe will evaporate in an instant. Some less important details. Me and Justin are both sleeping in the guest room, rearranged so that the two beds we have are facing the window. If David is out there, we want as much information as fast as possible. That is the current situation. Again, if anyone knows anything, let us know. I am unsure how to start this final post, or even how to go about writing this entire thing. It's been a while since my last post on David, so I suppose I should start with what came after it. It was my grandpa, Justin, and me, sitting around the dinner table with plates full of food prepared by Grandma. We did not speak much, all of us. Maybe not Grandma, were thinking about David. It was a good meal. Time would pass by as the five of us ate. My grandmother talked the most out of us. She would tell Justin how great of company he was, and how grateful that Justin and I were close friends. Of course, the two of us let out a small giggle at the comment. We were close, but not close, I suppose. After night fell, Justin and I retreated to the guest bedroom. The silence remained. The two of us would just look at our phones, waiting for something to happen, for David to show up. Justin, being bored, opened up his TikTok. There was little noise coming from our room. It was the first time I let myself relax for a moment. I allowed myself to slowly fall into a sleep. Must have been around 8 when I fell asleep. I woke up around 3 or 4 hours later, checking the clock on the wall. 1 in the morning. Justin must have fallen asleep right as I was waking up, as his phone was still playing a video as he slept with the one lamp in the room on. The scene before me was just like one of our sleepovers as kids. I had a few notifications on my phone. Most of them were just updates on the games I had on my phone. 1 or 2 of them were just telling me that some famous people I followed had posted, and I had a lot of messages from my ex. That was a bit strange, as we basically cut contact after David attacked me. I unlocked my phone, read a couple of messages, the first one being from an hour previous, and the latest being from 1 minute before. 108 messages were sent to me in that time. I rushed out of the house, only having time to pick up a few things. As I left, I screamed back inside the house where I was going. I hoped for it to wake someone up. 12:59, help. It was expected at this point that David would strike again. I just didn't know who. I hoped it would be me. I wanted to be attacked again, but that girl who cheated on me, who hurt me, I wanted to just leave her to defend herself. I wanted to pretend like I never got those messages, but I couldn't. I just couldn't let her be killed. I hate her. Don't get it twisted, but I wouldn't wish death on her. It would haunt me. It was a short drive from my grandparents to Jane's place. I only had a few weapons. The 6-shooter, a rifle, the knife that my dad got me for my 12th birthday, a bottle of hairspray, and some weed Justin left in my car. For the sake of this situation, I just grabbed the 6-shooter my grandpa gave me, and the knife. The rifle would be too heavy, and the other items were not even mine. Hell, they wouldn't even be useful. I mean, David only has so much hair, and I doubt we could talk things out through a smoke sesh. I was parked in the driveway. The entire neighborhood was silent. Not even the bark of James's neighbor's dog could be heard. An annoying little mix between a Chihuahua, Maltese mix who was always up till 3, walking around the house to the back. I find where David got in. I almost didn't believe it. The fucker climbed up to the 2nd story of the house. I can tell he broke in by the torn screen and shattered glass. Hey, fucker. I scream into the dark home. Come down and fight me like a man. It wasn't my brightest moment, but it helped shake a bit of the nervous feeling in my bones. David also didn't come down. I almost thought the house was empty. I received a message on my phone from Jane asking if I have a death wish. I texted back to mute her phone as I wanted to FaceTime her, to see what she was seeing. After a second, she FaceTimes me. She was hiding in one of the closets in her home. It was hard to tell which one, but when she put her phone camera up to the slit separating the 2 doors, I could tell she was on the 1st floor by the staircase leading up into the 2nd floor. Through the camera, I could see David slowly walk past her as he came near a window. He was peeking out. I look up from my phone. There he was. He was smiling, and I was frouncing. I could see into his mouth again, and just like last time, I was left in fear. David was not from this earth. David quickly began to shut all the curtains and blinds in the house. From the outside, it looked as if they all shut at the same time. I peeked down at my phone to see David moving at an impossible speed before stopping by the back door. He was waiting for me to come in. It clicked in my head. I don't know if David had a concept of technology, but he understood human behavior. He understood and kept up with human behavior as the generations grew and made technological advancements. This attack on my ex was just like a man using an elk call. I was being hunted. David was the one apex predator to surpass humans. All of the questions came running back. Why let me live this long? Why not kill me as a kid? Why now? What is preventing him from breaking down that door and killing me here? What is David, and what does it want from me? I look up at the back door. It was either my time to die, or my time to avenge all of those who came before me. I had unknowingly ran into a trap where only one of us comes out alive. I make my way back to my car carefully and quietly. I was still on call with Jane. David didn't move at all. I was worried about my phone or Jane's phone being broken, like how the cameras from home corrupted when recording David. But they were fine. I grabbed the rifle, paused for a second, grabbed the hairspray and Justin's things. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I needed to know I wasn't missing anything. I exit my car for a second time and just stare at the house. There was no place for me to enter without David knowing. In every situation I think of, it involves noise. The front door is locked. All the windows are closed with screens on them, and David was already at the back door. If I wanted to get in with a fighting chance, I would need to be quiet. I could enter from where David entered. Impossible with my height. I look at the ground. I notice a few large rocks, flowers, and other useless things. Things looked grim. If Jane wasn't inside, I would try to burn the whole place to the ground. Would fire even work? Damn it. I'm not a hero, nor am I not the heroic type. I want to go home and sleep in my own bed knowing my mom and dad are near. I hate this. I hear the roll of a car coming down the road, the headlights illuminating every house. It wasn't until the car parked next to mine did I realize that it was Justin's car. I make a shush finger. Justin immediately picked up what was going on. I hang up on Jane, sending her a message saying Justin was here. Silently, Justin exited the car. We whispered. Unsure if this thing had superheating. I hoped not. Do you have any idea on what to do? Justin whispered. Nope. Fuck. Is it out for blood this time? I think so. I answered this question with a bit of hesitation. Why? Justin asked. I had that same question. I have seen how David moves, how he runs, his strength, his everything, but it only left me with more and more questions. Why? I looked around again, looking at everything that I could grab. I checked Justin's car as well. There were several household items he had yet to unpack. Apparently, he was at Walmart when the events of my last post happened. He was ready to go home when he received my call. Me and Justin went over everything, and we had a plan. The house was silent as we set this plan into motion. The whole idea was to get Jane out into safety. Then Justin and I would figure out how to kill David. Justin would hopefully get David's attention and stall him outside the house while I got Jane out of the way. In an attempt to get David's attention, Justin would break a window furthest from where Jane was. If David attacked Justin, I would barge in and get Jane the hell out of the house and out of the way. Justin would have the rifle I brought and attempt to blast David into oblivion. If David was still standing, I had something prepared. You understand you could die? I asked Justin. This thing has haunted our town for generations, killing families for hundreds of years. If I have a small chance of bringing David down, then I am taking it. Remind me not to take you gambling. I respond. Justin let out a small giggle, not too loud. I'm surprised you can joke at such a time. I was too, and I agreed with what he said. While I may never have been the heroic type, while I might be scared shitless, I had to do this. Godspeed, I say, walking into my position. Don't be so corny, smart ass. It was around 2 in the morning. An hour had gone by since I had first gotten here. My heart started to speed up, thinking about David, the horrors I saw, the pain I felt, everything David had done. I don't believe in destiny or fate, but standing there waiting for my signal was one of those moments where my non-belief might have faltered. David had been watching me since I was a kid. Now here I am as an adult waiting for our final confrontation. I hear the glass shatter from the other side of the home. I slip through a window, breaking the screen down. David was distracted by Justin. Thank fuck. I could tell by the gunfire. I find Jane, right where I last left her on call. She was alive, but there was something different about her. I grabbed her arm and pulled her out the way I came in from. I told her to get out of here, that I would deal with this situation. There was something wrong with Jane, but I had no time to waste. I couldn't waste time figuring out what she needed. In retrospect, I wished I had stopped for just a second to ask her what was up. I run back to where Justin was. The gunfire stopped, and I feared that David had already killed Justin. I grabbed the plan B, just in case. As I turn the corner, I see the two of them, Justin laying yards away. He was bruised and bloody. David turned towards me. David was shot several times, but very few shots broke the indestructible skin that David had. The car light from Justin's car illuminated David from behind. I could barely make out his injuries. The shadow David cast was intimidating. I whip out my 6-shooter. I aimed all 6 shots to where I thought David's smile would be. I think maybe one of them hit, but that did not stop David. He let out a primal scream as he quickly shuffled towards me. I ran into the house, David following behind me, crashing into the door frame. I ran into the bathroom, quickly locking the door as I finished preparing my plan B. Aluminum is a highly reactive material accessible to the common man thanks to aluminum foil. Of course, aluminum won't react to the food you cover with it. Those chemicals that do react to aluminum will not be found in the food you eat if you cook right. Another thing to note, you never mix chemicals when cleaning because you can accidentally create dangerous situations. I was going to purposely create one of those dangerous situations. I had an empty bottle, already filled with aluminum foil that Justin had purchased. I knew Jane had the cleaning supplies that I needed to create an explosion. There was a thud that hit the bathroom door. As quickly as I could, I began filing the bottle of aluminum with cleaner, praying that it wouldn't react too soon or too late. Another thud. I put a lid on the bottle. Another thud, this one almost breaking the door. I jump into the bathtub carefully. David breaks the door down, splinters going everywhere. Simultaneously, I throw the bottle at David, ducking for cover in the tub. The explosion was louder than I thought it would be. I must have used way too much materials. A bright flash took over the bathroom for a brief moment. A loud ringing sound took over my hearing. My eyes were still adjusting, but I could see David's shadow laying on the ground. I had no time to waste. I pull out a lighter that Justin used whenever he smoked and grab the bottle of hairspray left in my car. I rush over to David, his skin looking red and a little burnt. I shake the hairspray, aimed. Nothing came out of the hairspray. It was empty, of course. Before I could go back into the bathroom and grab one of the other bottles that Jane had, David thwacked me, his long arms sending me flying across the home. The adrenaline was still pumping through my body. I crawled, trying to get outside, but David was stronger than I was. David stood back up, stumbling and clearly in pain. He made his way to my broken body. He lifted me up, my eyes more adjusted. I see what the bomb did to him. It wasn't just his mouth shifting this time, all of his skin as well. You, pray, challenge, the words coming out of David. His mouth was unmoving like a ventriloquist. The voice came straight from where I assumed his vocal cords would be. I struggled to speak a sentence in a response. What do you want from me?" Before David, or Johnson, or the amalgamation of ever-changing flesh could respond, several shots rang out into the air. Multiple holes appeared in the shifting skin. Out of those holes, a blood-like substance poured out like a fountain. David dropped me. His screams became less animalistic and more human. He turned around to see Jane with Justin's gun. David rushed her. She fired more shots. I grabbed a few spare bullets from my pocket. David became a difficult target to shoot at. He was faster and nimble compared to an hour ago. Almost intently, David reached Jane. I watched in horror as in one swift movement, David killed Jane. I dropped 2 bullets out of the 3 I had. David turned to me. It was all happening so fast, but everything seemed to slow down for me figuratively. Anger, sadness, fear. I took a breath. David took a step. This was one of those moments where my non-faith in fate faltered. This encounter was several years in the making. I had 1 bullet, one last shot to correct the hurt and pain that was inflicted on my grandfather. Justin's upstairs neighbors, the man who told my grandfather about liver-eating Johnson. This was justice for Sheridan, Wyoming, my home. I took another breath. David took a step. He opened up his mouth. His mouth opened and turned his entire body into one large mouth. Rows and rows of teeth following the mouth that now consisted of his stomach. I raised my gun, aiming for the head. I pulled the trigger and prayed. Simultaneously, knowing that there was nothing left I could do, I laid down and passed out. I would wake up to live another day. My grandfather told me about everything that happened while I was passed out. First thing he told me, I killed David. Jane's neighbors all called 911, rightfully so, about gunfire waking them up. Police and paramedics show up to find Justin half dead, Jane dead, me 3/4 dead, and an unidentifiable corpse. It looked like a mound of flesh and bone, according to my grandfather. The second thing he told me was my own condition. Justin would make a full recovery. He would just be in the hospital for a while, but I was paralyzed from the waist down. I knew the risk of fighting David. For my bravery, God seemingly gave me a second chance at life in exchange for my legs. The third thing was about legality of what I did. Thankfully, there is some sort of officer high in ranking who knew about my grandfather and how his kid was taken away from him. There will be no legal issues that will affect me and Justin. This last situation is being written off as a bear attack. It is the last bear attack that will ever be documented. So that is it. David is dead. I don't think I ever will get closure on some things. Things like why David waited so long to attack me. How did he live as long as he did? Who was David in the first place? But that is all right with me. It has been a week or 2 since I got out of the hospital. I started writing this last post yesterday. Jane's family came down from New York to gather her things and plan a funeral for Jane. They stopped by my parents' house where I will be staying, probably for longer than I ever thought I would, to say hello and goodbye to me. We had a long conversation about Jane and I, and what our relationship was. Apparently Jane did cheat on me, but felt terrible, calling her mom about the mistake she made, but that is neither here nor there. I thought about telling them the true story, what really happened, but decided against it. They don't need to live the horror that I had. On a brighter note, once Justin had gotten out of the hospital, he made his entire house handicap accessible. I told him not to, but he insisted. He says that I am welcome to stay if I am sick of my parents taking care of me. I think I might take his offer. It would be nice to live somewhere else. I suppose that this is the end of my story with David. I apologize if this isn't the ending that some of you expected or wanted, but that is just how the cards were dealt. I guess if you ever plan on going across Wyoming, come down to Sheridan. It is a beautiful small town with a bright future. Reddit is full of stories like these, some paranormal, others unexplainable, but they all have one thing in common. They stick with you long after you've finished reading. If you think you're ready for more, go ahead and explore those dark corners of Reddit. But don't say I didn't warn you. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.